The focus of my research proposal is on the impacts of court-imposed school attendance condition on young people within the youth criminal justice system. First, for a brief introduction. Probation orders are the most commonly imposed sentence in youth court in Canada. They include conditions that young people must follow. The purposes of sentencing under the YCJA are to promote rehabilitation and reintegration, but young people who do not follow conditions may be charged with failing to comply. With school attendance conditions specifically, young people may face a criminal charge failing to comply for a non-criminal act, truancy. So why is this important? Ultimately, if school attendance conditions equal improved school attendance, then the purposes and principles of sentencing under the YCJA may be being met. However, and this is a big however, if research suggests that conditions lead to further criminalization of the young people that receive them, it may require changes to probation practices. It may also suggest a larger issue of criminalization practices under the YCJA. This leads to my literature review. Early on, it was obvious that there's little research completed on the impacts of school attendance conditions specifically. So I had to broaden the review to look at the impacts of failed to comply charges more generally in the youth criminal justice system in Canada. First, I wanted to look at the impact of failed to comply charges on young people. In 2007, Pulis completed a random sampling of 69 case dispositions in Ontario youth courts. Similarly, in 2012, Sprott looked at a random sampling of 60 cases in Ontario youth courts. Both studies that were reviewed suggested that failed to comply charges for non-compliance resulted in negative outcomes for the young people that received them. So then I wanted to look at the probation officer's use of enforcement. Latimer reviewed probation files at a youth probation office in Ontario and interviewed 7 officers. Kewen and Corrado provided 110 surveys to youth probation officers to evaluate their implementation of the YCJA. Carter and Leascheid completed a qualitative study interviewing 17 youth with probation experience. Overall, probation officers are using least intrusive measures to deal with noncompliance and often have positive impacts on the young people that they work with. So this led to my 2 research questions. My first question is, does school attendance improve for young people who are supervised on a youth probation order with a school attendance condition? And my second question are, do probation officers who supervise youth with a school attendance condition charge youth with failing to comply with school attendance, or use other forms of enforcement to hold them accountable? Now I'd like to briefly discuss the methods I intend to use to answer these questions. For question 1, I would like to do a quantitative study. I would like to look at the pre-probation attendance records and compare these to post-probation attendance records of young people on probation with attendance conditions. No comparison group is necessary as the subjects will act as their own control group. I want to look at 30 closed probation files from 1 or more youth probation offices within Ontario. Latimer and Sprott did similar studies with this size of control group, and it was effective. To answer my second question, I'm looking at a mixed method approach. I would like to do a survey of quantitative and qualitative questions given to approximately 12 to 15 probation officers within the same Ontario probation offices as discussed in question 1. The hope is that it will determine when officers lay charges of willful failure to comply or use other enforcement options available to them. Studies by Kuhn and Corrado and Latimer found this to be an effective sample size in similar studies using interviews of probation officers. So the implications of my study. The literature review highlighted the lack of research completed on the impacts of probation conditions on the young people who receive them, and the lack of research completed on the effectiveness of enforcement by youth probation officers. My proposed study could address some of these gaps by providing a better understanding of how probation involvement influences school attendance specifically, and how the use of enforcement options may impact young people on probation. It may provide a better understanding of the broader trends in the youth criminal justice system and help probation officers better meet the needs of the young people they work with. Here's a list of my references, and if there are any questions, please let me know.